Yeah, so I'll just make a few opening comments and say really the main reason I'm here is to talk about electric vehicles and to do what I can to encourage the other car makers to accelerate their electric vehicle programs. I think the need for sustainable transport is incredibly high. I mean, even in the face of massively declining oil prices, I think it actually becomes more urgent that the auto manufacturers transition to electric and put a huge amount of effort behind their electric vehicle programs. As you know, at Tesla we've open sourced our patents, so we're trying to be as helpful as possible for the advent of electric vehicles. We've also said that our supercharger network, we're happy to have other car makers use that supercharger network. And we're really doing everything we can to accelerate the advent of sustainable cars. And so I think I'm hopeful that by coming here and maybe answering some questions, I can explain why I think the opportunity for electric cars is tremendous and why I think that all transport, with the ironic exception of rockets, will go fully electric. And so it's really just a question of when it goes fully electric. And if we can make it go electric sooner, then that will be much better for the world. And we do have a significant danger with fracking technology, which is, I think, really still at an early stage. Because I think fracking probably increases the accessible oil and gas in the world by perhaps a factor of 10. I mean, we don't really know what the full extent of it is, but it's probably something like an order of magnitude, which means the potential harm to the climate is really much greater than it was before, and we can't rely on scarcity to drive the price of oil and gas high. And have that be an adequate forcing function to move electric. So we have to figure out how to make electric cars themselves compelling without that economic forcing function of high gas prices. Thank you.
Very good. So Elon, welcome to the Motor City.
Thank you.
And thanks for being here. Just a couple of Canadian boys talking fast cars and rockets. Couldn't be better. If you were going to launch two businesses, I'm guessing the natural place to start would probably not be rockets and cars.
Yeah. I think for sure if you were to rank order companies to start and say what is likely to succeed and what has the best risk-adjusted return, pretty sure starting a car company and a rocket company would be at the bottom of the list.
So why cars and why space?
Well, because in the case of cars, it was very important for there to be an example of an electric car that was great. Like, there were no great electric cars. So people thought electric cars were like a golf cart. So they were slow and didn't maneuver well and had low range or ugly, didn't have much functionality. And that's the picture that people had in their minds. And we had to show people that an electric car could be fast, sexy, handle well, long range, and be a great car. And that's what we did with the Tesla Roadster. So it's really important to sort of just break the mold, to address that misperception that one couldn't make a great electric car, and then to show that if you made an electric car with all those attributes, that lots of people would buy it. Because even after we made the car, a lot of people said, well, yeah, you made this electric sports car, but nobody's going to buy it. And then we had to show, yes, there is demand for it, and the same for the Model S. And then with our Model 3 down the road, showing that it's possible to build a compelling, long-range, mass-market electric car. I think that's the third part of the strategy that I outlined with my first blog post about Tesla now almost 10 years ago. So that's...
You had a few people doubting you. I mean, when you go back
Just a few.
Just a few people, right.
Here and there.
If we go back to 2008, you've had a couple of failed rocket launches. You've got a lot of Teslas sitting around in the garage. There are some issues there. In an instant, you receive funding from NASA, a huge contract from NASA for $1.5 billion, and then you also get funding for the car company. But you were at the bottom, correct? I mean, you were...
Yeah, I think this is important to emphasize, because when people look at, say, Tesla and SpaceX now, and they sort of think, well, maybe they were always in a healthy position.
But it wasn't.
No, from the beginning, we were in really dire straits. No one would take us seriously, neither the rocket company or the car company. They just thought, well, he's sort of an eccentric rich guy, and he's going to lose all his money. And they told me that several times. I mean, the most common joke I heard was, how do you make a small fortune in the car business or the rocket business? And the punchline is you start with a large one.
Right.
So it's like, I'd heard that joke so many times. I would just hit them with the punchline before they had a chance to say it.
And you nearly had a nervous breakdown around. I mean, this was a personal.
I'm that close to a nervous breakdown.
Okay.
But I did think to myself on the Sunday before Christmas in 2008, waking up the Sunday morning thinking, I never thought I was someone who was capable of having a nervous breakdown, but this is about as close as I've ever come. Because things were really so dire. As you alluded to earlier that year, after the first 3 rockets had failed of our Falcon 1 vehicle, and I'd only really allowed for enough money for 3 flights, so we had to desperately try to scrape together enough money for a 4th flight. And then with Tesla, the financing round fell apart in the summer of 2008 because the whole financial markets were crashing, and GM and Chrysler were going bankrupt, and nobody wanted to give us money.
Not an ideal time to start a car company.
Definitely not. I mean, try to raise money for a startup car company that's making electric cars to boot, which is like that sounded like stupidity squared. Investors would be angry that we even asked them, like that we even asked them. They would be angry about that. And in fact, the only way we were able to raise money to keep Tesla going was that most of the existing investors agreed to fund the company, and I put all of the money that I had remaining into Tesla. So it still wasn't. It was amounted to about, in total, about $40 million, 20 of which came from me, and I was tapped out. Had to borrow money for rent after that, and that tided us over into for about 6 months to May of 2009 when Daimler invested in Tesla, and that Daimler investment was really fundamental to the survival of Tesla. In fact, a lot of people think like somehow the government bailed us out or anything. That is actually not true. It was the Daimler investment that saved Tesla, not government funding. The first money we got from the government ever was in March of 2010, and that was after the crisis had passed.
And it wasn't your intention that this would be profitable. I mean, you thought it was actually going to fail at some point, right?
Well,
or you weren't sure it was going to be that successful?
At the start of Tesla, when it was just me and a few guys, I thought we maybe had a 10% chance of success.
Okay. How do you feel now?
Well, now I think we've got now I think some degree of success is assured, but it's a question of the magnitude. So does Tesla become sort of a niche car maker making maybe 100,000 cars a year or something like that, which is obviously super, super tiny? That would be, I mean, 0.1% of market share. I think that's the definition of a niche. If you're 0.1%, you have to at least get past the decimal point to not be a niche. So that's one possible future.
100,000 or
yeah,
or your stated goals of 500,000 by 2020.
Yeah, I think we'll probably aim to do more cars than that. I'm not necessarily by 2020 show the 500,000, but I think we'll probably continue past that.
You'll continue past the 500,000.
Yes.
Okay. Within which time? Within what kind of time frame?
Let's say, I don't know. I think we should be able to get to probably at least a few million cars in 10 years, a year.
So by 2030?
By 2025.
Oh, by 2025, okay.
We can probably get to a few million cars a year. I think we're just going to keep driving our volume as high as we can, because our mission is fundamentally to transition the world to electric cars. So if we don't make a lot of electric cars, then we're not doing as much as we can. Now, I mean, that being said, I think most of the good that Tesla will accomplish is by sort of cutting a path through the jungle to show what can be done with electric cars. Like, so I think.
So you think that the industry as a whole will adopt a greater?
Yes, I think it's sort of the biggest impact that Tesla will have will be the degree to which we induce or cause other car companies to accelerate their plans for electric vehicles.
Do you feel they have that kind of passion right now?
It's a little bit, not much. You know, it's clearly not it's not front and center.
Yeah. There were some vehicles shown at the Detroit show, for example, that are more in your segment than others.
Yeah, I think that's great. I hope to see a lot more of that. But until we start seeing serious numbers of electric vehicles, that it's hard to say that there's a ton of effort behind it. Yeah. So I think we really.
Why is that?
Well, I think for a lot of people in the auto industry, it's not clear that the economics work for electric cars. I mean, it is a new technology architecture. And usually in the car industry, things don't change that much technologically. Relative to, say, consumer electronics, the pace of change is relatively slow. So I think for a lot of the car makers, they're uncertain about the demand for electric cars, and you get sort of a chicken and egg problem. Like, if you don't know whether there'll be high demand for electric cars, then you don't want to make the investment to build them at scale, and so then you don't know. You never find out what the demand is. I mean, there are certainly some exceptions like Nissan, and it's not what GM announced earlier. So, I mean, that all sounds good, but compared to the 100 million new cars and trucks made every year, we're still talking very, very tiny numbers.
So you're hoping that the industry really gets on board with the electrification plan, and that within that sweep, that Tesla then grows to these levels that you've just said. Do the economics work for you currently?
The economics do work for us. Yeah. I mean, I can't speak to our quarterly results before the quarterly results, but you know, we've been able to achieve a gross margin in the mid to high 20s. So that's a pretty good number, and you know, we are negative cash flow because we are investing a lot in automation in the Model X product line. Just basically scaling up our production, building out our sales and service infrastructure, building out the supercharger network, and developing, doing the final tooling for the Model X, doing some advanced work on the Model 3. So we're spending a lot of money. But if we were to just sort of scale back our growth and just go for moderate increases in, say, the Model S customer base, we would be profitable by any measure. And I think decently so. Some
say, I mean, the criticism out there is that every OEM adheres to GAAP accounting.
We do too.
With a call out for some non-recurring items, but you leave out some costs that are permanent requirements of GAAP, such as stock option expenses. So under GAAP,
they're in there.
Okay, under GAAP, do you make money then?
We don't make money under GAAP. We could make money under GAAP if we weren't growing and investing huge amounts of money. We certainly would be GAAP profitable. Yeah.
Why not just release it the way everybody else releases it?
Well, we do. We are required to release GAAP financials.
Okay.
We do.
Okay. When it comes to that kind of scale, when you mention those numbers and that sort of scale, that's going to require enormous infrastructure, right? I mean, let's just look at, the retail network as one point, the service side of things.
Sure.
How do you get to those numbers with the current situation that you have now? And are you open to other retail possibilities? There's been a lot of talk of perhaps partnering up or at least forming your own network, that you'd consider adding franchise dealers to your distribution network when the volume gets high enough. How close are you to that?
Well, I think what I've said is that there's no question we need to establish the initial foundation with our own stores. So that's what we're going to do in every part of the world, and we have been doing in every part of the world. So we think before considering taking on any franchise dealers, we first need to establish a solid base with our own stores, and in any given region. So once we've done that, and we're able to catch up with our production rate, because Tesla's just been production limited for the last, since we came out with the Model S, we've been production limited. So most of our focus is actually on production growth as opposed to demand generation. And we're more than, in terms of our weekly rate, we doubled it year over year. It's pretty hard for a manufacturing company with a complex supply chain to grow by almost 100% in annualized production. So I think at some point we'd consider franchise dealers, but we want to first establish just a few stores of our own, and we've struck various deals in places like, for example, in New York, the state of New York, where we the law now allows us to have up to 5 stores, and then beyond that we would have to go to franchise dealers. We're okay with a compromise of that nature in other states, like Michigan, for example.
Right.
I think that's a pretty fair compromise, and and then we feel secure at the stage of the company, because I don't want to be complacent about Tesla's success, and it is hard to sell electric cars. It's a lot more effort to sell it than a gasoline car, because there's a lot more education needed, and I just feel it's very important to have our destiny in our hands at the early stage, and then we can transition later if we can find the right partner, because obviously we would only do this if we were sure that a customer would have a really good experience. And there are certainly lots of examples of companies that have a mixed company-owned and franchise model, McDonald's being a key example.
Right. The auto industry is a little different, though, in that way.
Yeah.
Right. Are there...
Well, in the U.S., but,
right.
But in Europe, there's a mixture of company-owned and franchise.
Sure. But in the U.S., that's obviously not the case. Yeah. Are there levels that you need to get to, or what are the levels that you would need to get to in order to consider a partnership? Have you set those numbers in your mind?
It's hard to say exactly what the numbers are, because we need to get our production rate to the point where we are demand limited, not production limited. So what would that be? I don't know. It sort of depends on when we saturate demand. Okay. We're not currently at a point where we saturate demand, but it could be, I don't know, a few years or something. That's your estimation, that it would be a few years? Yeah, before we would consider such a thing.
And you'd want a partnership more than you would want? I mean, what would your preferred model be on the retail side?
Well, I don't know what the preferred model would be. The big thing I'd be concerned about is making sure that customers have an awesome experience, and that they have that the sort of sales experience and the service experience is consistent and excellent. So it would be that's what we'd have to feel comfortable about, and then obviously some of the car dealer groups have been fairly negative in attacking Tesla. We're obviously not going to work with them. Okay, just to be clear. Just to be clear, right? If you're being a jerk to us, we're not going to be turn around and try to do a partnership later. Right. That would be crazy.
On the factory storefront, you're still at an impasse in many states, and new challenges are cropping up all the time. And last year, there were a string of compromises and actually court wins for Tesla. Do you need a national solution to allow direct sales?
I mean, that's one of the possible outcomes, is a national solution.
Are you pursuing anything within
We're not
Congress
yet.
or federal courts?
No, we're not yet pursuing anything federally. Although there was a petition, a White House petition, I don't know if you know that, but that a petition to allow Tesla to sell direct nationally, which got 120,000 signatures or something. And we didn't create that at all. So it was just like basically our sort of Tesla fan base. So right now we're really just having interaction on a state-by-state level. I'll be in Texas tomorrow.
You've called that, I mean, it's kind of the hardest nut for you to crack here, right?
Texas is a very important market for us, for sure. And
you lost in 2013.
Yes.
What's going to be different this time?
Well, I think in 2013 we didn't have enough time to really talk to the key legislators. And we actually did pass in the House.
Right.
But the bill never made it to the Senate.
Senate, right.
So I think that I think it's mostly just about getting people comfortable, making sure there's a reasonable compromise here, and seeing what we can do. I do think, in the case of Texas particularly, direct sales is fundamental to the Texas ethos. I mean, Michael Dell, who started Dell Direct,
right,
in Texas. Okay, so like clearly, clearly, Texas is pro-direct, and so the prohibition against direct sales, I think, is antithetical to what Texas is about. It's un-Texan, and so I think we've got a decent chance of figuring out some compromise legislation in Texas this year. But feel fairly optimistic about that. And again, we're not looking for wholesale repeal of like the dealer laws. We're just saying like, look, let us have a few stores here, and then we'll talk later.
You want the same thing in Michigan, obviously.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think like anything we're asking for is like crazy or unreasonable or like going to take food from people's mouths or like we are a very tiny situation. So.
Right.
Even if we got big, we'd still be like maybe a few % of the market. So.
But if you get big in the direct sales method, I mean, if you go to an Apple store and there's a hot product, there are lines that are out the door. If you get hot in the Tesla market, I don't think car consumers want lines out the door, correct? So it doesn't.
True.
Right.
Yeah, people have come to expect that they can buy their car immediately, yeah, I mean, yeah, I suppose they don't want lines out the door. We don't have that many stores, It's really a pretty small number.
Let's get back to the business model. Do you need to start showing a profit?
Well, I think we will at some point need to start showing a profit.
When would that be?
When would that be? I guess probably when the Model 3 is in full production.
Which is when?
I mean, we feel pretty comfortable saying 2020, like at the getting to that 500,000. I think when we're doing 500,000 cars a year, I think we should be profitable at that point, or
by 2020,
or we're doing something wrong. Yes.
You got to start making some money.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there'll still be a lot of room for investing in future technology, but at that point, we should be at a reasonable scale where, despite investing in new technology, we're still profitable.
So, just to be clear, you're still on track for the 500,000 by 2020?
Yes.
Okay. How many Model S's did you sell last year?
Well, I can't say the number because I'd be front-running the earnings call. But we're pretty happy with the number of cars that were produced and ordered. With Tesla, the metrics are a bit different because in the normal car business, sales and deliveries are the same thing. Because the cars go to the dealer lots and then they get sold. But in the case of Tesla, and so that's a real understanding of the demand level. In the case of Tesla, since most of our cars are ordered in advance, the actual measure of demand is how many orders does Tesla have on the books, because they're built to order,
right.
And there's a typical waiting time of anywhere from 1 to 4 months. So
you had said you wanted to sell 35,000 last year. That was the goal.
That was our aspiration, yeah.
Did we come close?
Again, no, it's.
Or did you have enough
Our
orders?
aspiration was to deliver
Right.
35,000. And we actually changed that to 33 because it was getting too difficult to get deliveries done over the end of over the Christmas break and everything. So our aspiration was to deliver 33,000 cars. We sold, in terms of orders for cars, far more than that.
Okay.
And then there's a question of how many cars were manufactured, and then how many cars were delivered. So those are the metrics that really are important, and we need to do a better job of educating the media so they don't conflate gaps like sales, meaning deliveries, with actual demand, because they'll think, oh, deliveries went down, so that must mean fewer people wanted your car. But actually, the reason deliveries went down is just that our manufacturing ramp was slower than we expected.
Well, because you don't report monthly sales and delivery numbers, the investors and media kind of guess at all kinds of crazy methods and put out all kinds of bad information. So every OEM reports sales by market. Why not release the number like any other car company?
I think we probably will in the future, but I think once every 3 months and once every month it's not a huge difference. I'm not sure how that actually helps, really. It helps if you're in the press and you could write 3 times as many articles instead of 1. Okay.
See, you're educating the press today, so
Yeah, so I'm sure. Okay, I can see how that helps if you're a writer, but it's not just not clear how it's helping Tesla. And I think sometimes it's difficult to interpret these numbers because we will make cars in batches. So we'll make cars for 3 weeks. We'll just make cars for Asia, and then we'll switch to cars for Europe, and then we'll switch to cars for US, and then those will get delivered in waves. And then so people see huge differences in deliveries from 1 month to the next, and assume that somehow consumers are going through these wild gyrations in their interest in the car. It's actually got nothing to do with that. It's just when the boat left. Okay, so that's all. So I think right now, releasing things on a monthly basis would just get people really confused.
Are your U.S. sales rising? Or are your orders for U.S. cars rising?
Yes.
By how much?
No, I can't give that detail.
All right. I can ask.
But I can say that over the course of last year, we saw a significant increase in demand for North American. A significant increase in North American demand, and a significant increase in demand in Europe. Things were a little weaker in China, but just because I think of some communications issues that we need to fix. Most importantly around charging. People have a misperception that charging is difficult in China, but actually at this point we feel we've solved all of the charging issues. But we've got to work to correct that misperception. So I'd say North America and Europe, excellent. Actually, Europe's surprisingly excellent. And then places like Hong Kong are actually really good. Australia, good. But then China was sort of unexpectedly weak in the fourth quarter. We had more than enough demand to make up for the reduced demand in China, and we'll fix the China issues, I think, and be in pretty good shape probably towards the middle of the year.
The Model X is now over 2 years late. What went wrong?
Well, I do have an issue with punctuality, I have to admit.
You were always that kid that was a little late to class?
It's just like, yeah, exactly. It's true. I'm like, I guess, I'm sort of inherently optimistic, and I think sometimes that optimism leads to me thinking it can get done sooner than it can. So I'm trying to recalibrate a little bit. But at this point, I'm confident that the Model X is really going to be a phenomenal car.
When is it coming out?
This summer.
Okay, so it'll for sure launch this summer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure this summer. And we do want to be cautious with the Model X and make sure that we've done a lot of validation testing to make sure, in particular, that the Falcon Wing door works perfectly in all circumstances. So it's like rain, slows, sleet, hail, on a steep incline, in all sorts of crazy circumstances. Because the door is fundamentally different, no one's ever done sort of a double-hinged gull wing, or what we call a falcon wing door.
Falcon wing door.
And we think it's sort of a fundamental step change in utility for an SUV. It gives an SUV more utility than a minivan. And then because the center of mass is down low with the battery pack in the floor pan, it has a better center, a lower CG than any. It has like a CG of a sports car, and the functionality of a minivan. This car is really good, and I do not say these things lightly. I mean, I'm very self-critical of my own stuff, and I really think this is going to be something special.
Earlier this week at the Detroit show, Sergio Marchionne said that there needs to be more consolidation in the industry, mainly to cut the cost of developing products. The problem in the car business is just the cost of investments and how much it takes to invest in a platform, as you well know.
Yes.
You've had discussions with BMW. Did Mercedes talk to you before it sold its Tesla stake?
Yeah, actually, just to comment on the BMW stuff. That was really sort of weird because I happened to be in Germany and made an offhand comment to one of the German magazines because they asked me what am I doing in Germany besides getting the Golden Steering Wheel Award. And I said, yeah, well, BMW invited me to stop by and we talked about various things. And that got blown up into, Elon Musk announced his giant partnership with BMW. It's like, look, man, I was just passing through, okay?
Ian? He was passing through.
I was just passing through. And then, so then the media sort of built up this massive story, and then discovered that it wasn't true, and then said, well, he lied about that thing. And I was like, I know.
Just stick to Twitter. You'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you looking?
I mean, we're happy to discuss partnerships with multiple companies. Obviously, we've done things with Daimler and with Toyota.
Are you looking at more partnerships right now?
We're not actively seeking any partnerships because our focus is so heavily on improving our production capability, and then completing the Model X. So we're super focused on those two things, and those are really hard because we're trying to double our production capacity again year over year, and get the Model X, which is a complicated new car with some things that have never been done before, to market and make sure it works well. So we're really just heads down focused on those two things, as well as doing some of the preliminary work on the Model 3. Mm-hmm. And in any case, until the Gigafactory is up and running, we just don't have enough cells to do deals with other car makers. But we're happy to have preliminary talks that perhaps come to fruition in 3 years or something.
So the Gigafactory, I mean, that's an enormous bet, right?
Yeah, it is a huge bet, but I don't know of any other way to do it. The amount of batteries we need is so huge that somebody's got to build this thing. And if we don't contribute a bunch of money to building it, I just don't see any other company doing that. Fortunately, Panasonic has been an awesome partner, and they're making a significant contribution. But I mean, just to get the whole thing to full capacity, it's something on the order of $5 billion.
Right.
With Tesla, we're expecting to contribute probably a little over $2 billion. Panasonic maybe a little under $2 billion, and then various other industrial partners making the precursor elements for the anode, cathode, and separator perhaps contribute 500 or 600 million. The state of Nevada, contrary to news reports, is actually only providing a very small amount of money in the beginning.
How much is that?
A few $100 million.
Okay.
And that's in the form of land grants.
Mm-hmm.
There are all these, again, if I may complain about something, I did write a blog piece about this. The way it was portrayed by some of the media, in terms of the tax abatements that Tesla got in Nevada, was that we were getting $1.3 billion. So they made it sound like the state of Nevada was wiring us a check for $1.3 billion. Nothing like that, remotely like that, has occurred. They're literally contributing less than 5% of the cost of creating the Gigafactory, and then And then all of the other incentives are basically consist of not charging us like property and sales and use tax on the vast amount of equipment that we're buying for the next sort of 10 to 20 years. And in the most crazy situation where we buy some enormous amount of equipment, over the course of 10, 20 years, that sort of use tax amounts to about $1 billion, which is like $50 million a year.
Right.
But that's for a factory that's outputting $5 to $10 billion per year. So it's like 1%. It's very tiny. People should not be under the impression that Nevada's paying for the factory. They're not.
What if the Gigafactory doesn't drive down battery costs like you think it will?
It will, guaranteed.
Guaranteed.
Well, I mean, if it doesn't, like, I should definitely be fired, and and yeah. But
so it's going to make all of this very scalable, the way that you've described it earlier in the conversation about the millions that you're going to get to.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bar that we have to pass on the Gigafactory for the Model 3 is a 30% reduction on the pack cost, because it being a smaller car, like the car needs to cost half as much, but the car is going to be about 20% smaller anyway. So that means to make up,
to cost half as much as
the Model S.
As the Model S, okay.
Yeah. So starting price of the Model S is $70K, so we're talking $35K.
30,000, right?
Yeah. So $35K before any incentives, and so we have to make, to first approximation, everything cost about half as much. So looking at the pack itself, because the car is, let's say, 20% lighter, it's going to require a 20% smaller battery pack. But we need that. But in order to get to the 50% reduction, we need another 30 points. So the Gigafactory, by virtue of economies of scale, has to contribute that additional 30 points. Now, we're not just doing economies of scale. We're also improving the fundamental technology around the cell and the battery pack. And I think if just based on economies of scale, because we're talking about a factory that would make as much lithium-ion batteries as the rest of all lithium-ion batteries in the world combined, of all types.
Right.
So if you take up lithium-ion batteries made for cars, laptops, cell phones, and you sum up all those factories, that comes to a little over 30 gigawatt hours of production at the cell level. We're talking about 35 gigawatt hours of production at the cell level and 50 gigawatt hours of production at the pack level. So we'll still be bringing cells in from other factories. I would say I'm absolutely certain we can achieve a 30% cost reduction.
Okay.
I think it'll be, over time, better than 30%.
By, again, that 2020 time frame or beyond?
Yeah.
Your parts...
High confident 30% by 2020, and with continued reductions after that.
Okay. Your parts service model, if you're talking about the scale that you're discussing here, needs to clearly evolve, right, in order to meet all of this demand for parts and service. What are you going to do there?
Well, I guess we're going to hire a lot of people in service and get lots of parts. For sure.
But you're going to need more than a van going to, fix somebody's car, right?
More than 3 guys in a van.
Right, more than 3 guys in a van, yeah. So what's the vision there?
Well, we have lots of service centers. So we're adding, that's our biggest focus is service centers, much more than stores. So we're acquiring a lot of service centers and hiring a lot of people and building out that service infrastructure. And I think there's some ways that we can really innovate on service and do some really exciting things there, which we'll talk about later this year, that really take service to like a different level.
You're talking about the quality of service, not the quantity so much.
The quality and how fast it happens.
Okay. Can you give us a hint?
We'll make the announcement probably in a month or two. But I think it's really, I think it has the potential to revolutionize service, with some really innovative things. I think service should feel like invisible love. So it's just like when your car gets serviced, you don't even know that it was serviced. Like, it's just invisible. It just happened. And when it's done and your car's back, you love it.
You feel the industry has that right now?
No.
Okay.
Definitely not.
Some say, you represent yourself as an entrepreneur. You get government, yet you get government subsidies in various ways, whether it's the battery plant or the solar plant or your rocket company. Some say that subsidy level would put into question your whole nature of your businesses. So, are you just the best ever at getting government money?
No, I think I'm quite terrible at getting government money, actually. So if you look at Tesla and SpaceX and SolarCity, they got no government money at all in the first sort of half decade of their existence. Nothing. Government wasn't doing anything. And then I'll go through each one. In the case of Tesla, as I mentioned, the first government money we got was March of 2010, 7 years after the company was started. And that money was specifically for Model S development and for powertrain factory development. So we got $465 million, 365 of which was for the Model S, 100 for powertrain factory that could supply powertrains to other companies. But that was only paid, like, we'd have to spend the money, show the receipts, get it ordered by Price Waterhouse, and then be reimbursed a few months later. That didn't help us with the Roadster business. It didn't help us with anything else, and it only paid for a small portion of what Tesla needed. The money that Tesla needed and has by far been generated in the private sector. So at this point, we've generated, I think we've raised $4 or $5 billion in total, whereas we had one government loan for $465 million. This compares to loans that were vastly greater to GM, Ford, and Chrysler, vastly greater, like 100 times greater. So, in the grand scheme of things, what's remarkable is that Tesla received so little government support, not that it received a lot. Do
you see a day when Tesla will be able to sell cars without government dependence?
Well, we paid off our loan, by the way. We're the first to pay off our loan, and
just in terms of sales incentives.
Well, there's the $7,500 tax credit, which applies to everyone. It's
sure it does.
And it's there for any manufacturer.
Absolutely, but
so that's.
But can you sell without that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
We sell it. We don't just sell in the United States.
No, understood.
So,
it was a U.S. question.
Yeah. So we sell in 34 countries. Most of those countries have no incentives.
Right.
So obviously, we're still selling cars. What the incentive does is it's a slight catalyst. So if our car costs, including options and everything, somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000, and you get a $7,500 tax credit, okay, so you got about an 8% reduction in the car. That's helpful.
Not a deciding factor.
It's not a deciding factor. It has a slight positive catalytic effect. Our sales would be slightly less if without that.
Okay.
That's all. And then there are the zero-emission vehicle credits, which those predate the whole CO2 things. I think people forget where the ZEV credits, that applies to about a third of the states in the country, but particularly California. The zero-emission credits were put in place because the air quality was so terrible in LA and the Bay Area that people couldn't breathe and were getting, you had to have smog warnings, and people were getting
but you're selling
emphysema and lung disease and everything. So, but those ZEV credits were because you have all this toxic gas coming out of gasoline cars in close proximity to each other, and hurting people's health. That's where the ZEV credits actually come from. Any manufacturer can acquire ZEV credits by making zero-emission vehicles. So again, it's a level playing field. If we're able to sell zero-emission credits, it's simply because some other manufacturer doesn't want to make zero-emission vehicles. This is not some special handout for Tesla. This existed decades before Tesla. And to those companies, I would say, hey, why don't you make zero-emission vehicles? That's the way to not pay not have to buy zero-emission credits.
Pure and simple. Change the subject. Are you a good boss?
I try to be a good boss most of the time. I mean, not all the time.
You've lost a lot of talent in the last few years.
Okay, that's false. So,
Correct.
there was a completely asinine Wall Street Journal article that was written yesterday. You read that piece? Okay.
There was a mention of this event in there, yeah.
Yeah, that article consisted of entirely, it was amazing to see an article consisting of entirely of statements that are either obvious, wrong, or obviously wrong. Okay? Amazing. How did you manage to write an entire article and bat 1,000 on that category?
Okay. You have lost talent, though, right?
Is there a company that exists that has not lost talent on Earth anywhere? Well, of course not, right? Every company, there's attrition at every company. What matters is what's the longevity of key executives and personnel at the company. Do they stay there a long time, or is there a lot of turnover?
Do you feel your turnover rate's in the right place?
Our turnover is less than industry average, not higher. That's why the article was so ridiculous. They used the example of like the Tesla general counsel, where they said, Tesla had in the course of 1 year, 3 general counsels. That sounds like a lot, except whenever an executive position changes, in a year, you have 2, right? So all that means is the guy in the middle didn't work out.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I mean, this isn't rocket
science,
right?
I'll take. Okay, the guy in the middle didn't work out. But Tesla's been around for 12 years. We've had 3 general counsels. That's an average of 4 years per general counsel, which is the standard sort of tenure for a general counsel. The average industry for a general counsel is about 4 years. And SpaceX, SpaceX is a year older. We're 13 years old. We've had 1 general counsel the entire time. So his tenure is now 13 years. So it would be like if I had a problem with general counsels, you'd see that problem manifest itself at SpaceX as well as Tesla.
Sure.
But in fact, the tenure at SpaceX is 3 times industry average, and at Tesla it is exactly industry average.
Okay.
And I think with communications was another thing cited. The article wasn't even internally consistent because it says we had lots of turnover, and people implying that maybe people don't like working for me in the communications role. It's Ricardo Reyes just returned to Tesla to run communications. I don't think somebody returns to a company if they hate it.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense.
Okay. Your stock price, it peaked at $289 a share in September, and now it's at about $200, $202. Has that raised expectations for the company performance that may be difficult to meet? And what do you think of the wild fluctuation of your stock price? Do you sometimes wish that it wasn't, that it had not risen so high?
Yeah, I think this is one of the downsides of being a public company is that you have people that are constantly speculating on the stock. They're speculating on the upside, speculating on the downside.
I mean, you tweet and it moves 10%.
Depends, not necessarily in the positive direction.
Right.
And by the way, I should say, if I ever do a tweet or a public announcement, it's got nothing to do with the stock price. But what concerns me is I don't want customers thinking something that's wrong. Okay.
Sure.
For long-term investors in Tesla, the short-term fluctuations are not important, and we cater our actions and our announcements to the long-term investors in Tesla. Those are the ones we really care about. The people that are in it just to speculate and then are out the next day, we feel about them about the same way they feel about us. We don't care.
Which brings me to marketing. Right now, you don't buy any advertising. With the sales volumes you just mentioned earlier.
Well, like I said, since our challenge is building production rates, we need to not be production constrained in order for it to make sense for us to buy advertising.
Right.
Otherwise, we're just wasting money. We should take the money we spend advertising and just invested in production capacity growth. So I'm not like super against advertising. I think at some point we will do advertising, but we just need to get past this production limitation.
So that production limit, I mean, you've mentioned it a couple of times here. It's obviously an enormously key point in your mind. The production constraints, the limitations that you have, when do you see that easing, and how is it going to ease?
Well, we're working very hard to grow the rates. I mean, as I said, our weekly production rate year over year has increased 100%. For a manufacturer of a large complex object, that is a huge percentage growth. And we're going to try to increase it again by 100% year over year in terms of the weekly production rate, beginning start of the year to the end of the year.
Next year?
Yeah. So from beginning of this year to the end of next year, we want to try to
Double
our production rate. I don't know exactly where the demand, where we start to have production exceed demand. I don't think it's going to be this year, because we've already sold out of all the Model X's we could possibly make this year.
For 15?
For 15, yeah.
Right.
So just in advance orders for Model X. If you order a Model X now, it arrives in 2016.
Wow.
So
that's a long wait for...
Yeah. So as many Model X's as we can make this year, we will sell. So the challenge is not trying to generate more demand for the Model X. Like we don't try to do that at all. Our challenge is we just got to bring it into production, make sure it is a super great car, reliable, and everything works well, and then ramp the production rate. That's our challenge. So I don't know. Conceivably, advertising might make sense next year or year thereafter, but it's difficult for me to predict when demand outgrows supply.
So no Super Bowl in 2 weeks. Okay.
No.
You've become quite a mainstream culture celebrity. Is that help or is that a hindrance?
I think it's a double-edged sword for sure. It's gotten a lot harder for me to just go have a drink at a
hang
bar.
out.
Yeah, it is. It's gotten if I go to just try to hang someplace with my friends, then people will come up to me quite a lot, and they're almost always really nice and everything. But it is.
That's probably not what you expected in December of 2008.
No. I think December of 2008. That was when, I was being accused of being, an idiot, a charlatan, an idiot and a charlatan, not even a good charlatan. And there were multiple bloggers keeping the Tesla death watch, like they were on day 5,000 of the death watch at this point. So
Tesla's going to work?
Tesla's going to work. Yeah, it is working.
I couldn't let you go without asking about space. Only 4 entities have ever launched a space capsule into orbit successfully and brought it back. The United States, China, Russia, and Musk.
Well, we have a company, but yeah.
Well, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
SpaceX.
SpaceX, right. What have you learned from the space industry that you can apply to cars?
Well, for rockets, mass optimization is extremely important. Like use of advanced materials and mass optimization is extremely important. If you, the requirement for mass optimization, say going from a car to a plane, is an order of magnitude, and then going from a plane to a rocket is another order of magnitude in the importance of mass optimization. So that's why, for example, using aluminum in the body and chassis was a no-brainer for me for the Model S, even though people certainly had some internal battles on that front to make that happen. But for me, it was a very obvious choice. You want to make the car light and still have an amazing crash rating, everything, and overcome the challenge of a heavy battery pack. You have to make the non-pack portion of the car light, so it had to be aluminum. I think in the future we'll be investigating some advanced alloys that don't currently exist, and as well as bringing over some of the interesting alloys we have in the rocket industry. So I think in terms of material choice, of advanced joining technologies, and setting up the geometry and constraints such that you can really create a mass-optimized vehicle, I think that's the most valuable thing.
Are you going to travel to Mars in your lifetime?
I hope so.
Is that part of the plan?
It depends on how long I live, of course, and what progress SpaceX.
But you have like a 10 to 20 year horizon here where you want to, I mean, you want to go to Mars.
I want to enable large numbers of people and cargo to go to Mars. So it's not sort of about me personally wanting to make a journey to Mars. I mean, that would be nice on a personal level, but I do think it is important that we as a species, as a civilization, are on a path to become a true spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species. I think that's the future that's exciting and inspiring. That's the bright future. And what we're trying to do with SpaceX is do what we can to help make that bright future true.
You've got 5 boys. Do they like cars?
They're a little blasé about the cars.
Do they like your cars?
Yeah. Although I get the critiques. I'll tell you one funny thing. When the Model S first came out, I intentionally deleted the rear reading lights in the back seat because I was like, people are just going to use Kindles and iPads and electronic readers. So like, why do you need a light in the back? And then one of my kids was trying to read his book in the back and said, "This is the stupidest car in the world." Why was it? Like, how could you do this? It's like, okay. After that, we put the lights in the back.
Have you ever talked to Warren Buffett?
Yeah, we've had a few brief conversations. He's always a great guy to talk to.
How about the car retail business?
No, we haven't talked about that. I did read that he made an investment on that front. I had a longer conversation actually with Charlie Munger before I was aware of the BYD thing back in, I don't think it was probably 2008 or 2009. And I was having lunch with him, and he was just, I'm a huge admirer of Charlie Munger, but he was just telling me all the ways that Tesla was going to fail. It made me quite sad, actually. But now apparently he thinks quite highly of Tesla and what we're doing. So.
What would you want to see out of the? You're in Detroit. You're here during the biggest week of the year. What would your message be to the traditional automotive industry?
I think the biggest message is just that I really would strongly recommend making significant investments in electric cars. And I think people won't regret making those decisions.
Even at $2 a gallon?
Yes, absolutely.
That doesn't hinder anything, does it?
It does reduce the economic forcing function to some degree.
The economic forcing function?
Meaning high gasoline prices.
Right, I know.
So there is some reduction, but $40, $50 a gallon is still fairly high. A barrel is still fairly high. And I think there will be increasing efforts by environmental groups and governments to place a price on carbon. Obviously, that wouldn't just affect the price of carbon for gasoline, but also affect it for electricity and everything. But an electric car is so much more efficient that even if all the electricity was generated by hydrocarbons, it's still better to, in terms of CO2 per mile, to have an electric car. So I think there's going to be huge societal pressure towards electric cars. And I think they're just sort of fundamentally better. It's just a fundamentally better architecture. You can have very high torque. The efficiency of an electric motor can be upwards of over 90% compared to a gasoline engine at more like 20%. So I think that's where the future is going to go. But it's only going to go there if the big car companies make risky decisions to do electric vehicles. And I hope they do. And as I said, we're trying to be as helpful as we can be, which is sort of counterintuitive because, like, why do we want all these competitors?
Well, that's the point. And you've seen some competitors come out this week, and it is counterintuitive. But the way you describe it, the more the merrier.
Well, the reason that I'm doing it, and certainly a lot of people at Tesla are doing it, is because we think it actually is going to make a difference to the world if we transition to sustainable transport sooner rather than later. We're not doing this because we thought it was like a way to get rich or anything. Like I said, I thought maybe 10% chance of success at the beginning. I thought I would just lose all my money, and almost did. So it's not like it was came very close to losing everything. I think we're really going to regret the amount of carbon that we're putting in the oceans and atmosphere. I mean, we're really going to regret it.
Great. Thank you very much for coming here today.
Right.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Elon Musk.